Good evening, folks. It's Freddie Vasquez. This is Basement Politics Unfiltered. Tonight, I have a guest who will be joining me to discuss the corruption in the family courts. Good evening, folks. I'm Freddie Vasquez. This is Basement Politics Unfiltered. Tonight, we're going to be discussing family court. Once again, I have another parent, another mother who's fighting to get her children back, and she will be on to discuss another corrupt judge in the family court system. This one's actually moved on to the Supreme Court. It should concern all of us. Help me welcome Antonella to the show. Good evening, Antonella. How you doing today or this evening?
Thank you.
Considering. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you reaching out to me and wanting to come on and discuss, what you've been going through. I've spoken to other families who have very similar, issue. They've been dealing with the same exact thing. Maybe the only difference is the judge or the attorneys or, the individuals. But the way the system works, from what they've told me, is pretty much exactly the way you've seen it to work. And it's not a good thing. Please tell me a little bit about what you're going through just from the beginning for folks who are not familiar with your story.
Yeah, and like you said, they all have the same tactics. So my case, I unfortunately was in a pretty bad marriage, dealing with a narcissist, and it was time for me to just end the marriage. A lot was happening. It got to the point where it became physical abuse. So we filed in Supreme Court, because in divorce you have to, you have assets, you file in Supreme. And the presiding judge was Judge Sherry Eisenpress. At the time, she was a family court judge, but acting Supreme Court judge. And then eventually, like you said, she became a Supreme Court judge last year. Going in thinking, okay, it's going to be amicable. I'm going to get divorced. We're going to do 50-50. My daughter at the time was 11. My son was, a little younger. But when we decided, when we started proceeding with the divorce, my ex-spouse started to, of course, like a lot of tactics. He started, just to start saying false allegations, and it was more hearsay, no evidence, but just hearsay. And one in particular was I was mentally ill. In my case, though, in my marriage, I pretty much, once my children were born, I was home with them. I raised them. He was, traveling. He pursued his career. And he does very well, and makes a lot of money. So when it was time for divorce, he was not open to, I guess, giving me those whatever I was entitled to, as well as even paying child support. So thinking, I retain attorneys, thinking, okay, they're there for my best interest. The judge is there for my children's best interest. That wasn't the case. It took me a while, but eventually, and it's 5 years and still going, it just started to get worse.
Let me just recap. So your husband makes a lot of money, very wealthy. He and you and your relationship and your marriage started to go in a direction you weren't happy with, and you reached a point where you thought it would, you decided this is time to divorce. And, like most people, if they ever think about divorce, they just think, okay, we'll go to court, we'll come up with an agreement that we both are happy with, where, and amicably we'll do this. And then, this would be the new life, for our family, right? But you never anticipated everything that you've dealt with. You never anticipated going through what you've been through and uncovering a lot of the what I call the corruption within the family court that you have experienced, and you never realized that one day you may not have access to your children, which is kind of where you're at now. And the reason you're saying for this, and other parents have said, is because of the money involved, right? So when you got to the point where you started going to court. Tell me what happened there. How did that begin with the courts?
I mean, it started off. That was the problem. I wanted to mediate, and I wanted to just be amicable and just get divorced. But then he filed a contempt motion, claiming that I was mentally ill and I was alienating him from the children, which that was not the case. I mean, we were living in the home together. He was never home. Like he had another, he had already, he had a girlfriend. He had established another relationship during the marriage. And so, and he was going out with her, and he was, pursuing his career, and he was traveling, and he was, going to, so that right away, it went from I was mentally ill. It wasn't even like we didn't even go through the process of we were going to try to find an agreement and divorce. With that,
Why did he accuse you of being mentally ill? What was the basis
I
for that?
believe it was the typical narcissist. It was a way of trying to get full custody, trying to say she's crazy, she's not amicable, she's alienating me from the child, and I have rights. And that's later on I learned, I started to educate myself in just these false allegations of parental alienation and mentally ill, and some people even make the false allegations of abuse. I never abused the children. The children wanted to be with me, so he had to find another tactic to go against, to attack me with. And so that's where he went. And then with that, then they asked for a forensic evaluator. In Supreme Court, the judge has the access and ability to court appoint who she wants. So these are people that she works with very closely. They do all her forensic evaluations, and then they start adding AFCs, which is attorneys for the children, and then they start adding family therapists, and then they start adding parent coordinators. And these are all people that work together, that work for the judge. They're there. They're basically making money. The judge is pretty much giving them, business, and say, okay, I'm going to court appoint these people. I'm going to choose who I want. And they're pretty much there to write and say what the judge wants, or
And what is the purpose of these individuals? They're the first person that was appointed, a forensic examiner. I'm sorry, would you?
Yeah, so sometimes in custody cases, they have they court appoint a forensic evaluator, which then is supposed to evaluate and question both parents and usually the children. And then they see where if there is parental alienation, if there's mental illness, they're there to see if and they can make their own they can actually make recommendations.
So they're there basically to help the judge make a decision on the case, right?
Correct.
But in situations like the one you found yourself in, where there's a good judge who is,
Usually, right, court appoints.
Right, they'll appoint specific individuals that they probably go to all the time in cases because it's a money machine, right?
Correct.
Is that right?
And then after, the judge court appointed this forensic evaluator, it was interesting. He never said I was mentally ill or had any sort of personality disorder. But he made recommendations in the report. But interestingly, they wanted me to be reevaluated with the hopes that maybe, knowing the situation and knowing the judge, that there would be a bad report in regards to my mental state. And I got reevaluated right away with another psychiatrist, actually psychologist, and there was no findings of mental illness. In fact, I got reevaluated 4 times because the judge kept saying, oh, I think you're mentally ill. I think you're mentally ill. Because they had to find an excuse or, some kind of to retaliate and do what she did.
Right. She seemed like she had an agenda. Correct. And she was trying to get to that and reach that goal. And the first evaluator didn't give her the report she wanted. Correct. The second one didn't.
The third and the fourth. And then it got to a point where she then put me on supervised visits, and they kept changing supervisors. And I went through 9 different supervisors. In fact, they had 3 supervisors that would rotate with the hopes that there would be a bad report, a negative report against me. There was never any negative. I have over 100 reports, none of them negative, but there were some negative against the father. So once they saw that, then they would change the supervisor. And these are court-approved supervisors. The court has a list of supervisors that you can choose from. So it was interesting. It got to a point where they were just getting frustrated that none of these reports were bad. And so they had to figure out a way, we need someone to write a bad, and it got to a point where the judge ordered the AFCs. Of course, she appointed 2 separate AFCs, one for my son and one for my daughter. So
and what is an AFC? I'm sorry, just for people who may not know.
Attorney for the children. So when
Attorney
they
for the
feel
children.
that, then the children have an attorney, and then they have to, obviously, represent the children. But the judge court ordered 2 separate attorneys, which then in Supreme Court you have to pay out of pocket. So that doubled up the fee. And then it got to a point where it was normally they just a court appoint 1, but in my case, a court appointed 2 separate attorneys to give 2 attorneys business, right? And then I believe maybe they were hoping that maybe one child would say, I want to be with the dad, and one child say, I'd be, with the mom or whatever. That wasn't the case in my case. But the judge was like, okay, I want you to I want you to get another supervisor of your choosing. And they did. But again, I went through 9 supervisors, and none of them were, were
and you have to pay for it.
Yes, you have to pay.
You have to pay for supervised visitations, correct? And how much is that?
I mean, now the going rate is 150 an hour. And so if you want to see your kid for 3 hours, you could be paying 150 for 3 hours per hour.
Yeah, $450 just to see your children.
So
and you've done nothing wrong.
Right.
You've done nothing wrong. Not one bad report. You've dealt with examiners, supervisors. And in fact, the only thing that they found that they can, complain about or found wrong was with your ex-husband. And yet the judge, and this judge is, and I want to show her here. This is the judge here. And she's known for having complaints and grievances filed against her. Explosive grievance complaint targets New York judges for alleged misconduct and bias. And this is the judge here, Sherry Eisenpress.
She is notorious for siding with the moneyed spouse.
And what's interesting here, and some people who follow the podcast here, look whose name popped up. This is a fundraiser. So a lot of this is political. A lot of this is about political connections, who you know. And I've dealt with situations like this. Here's the judge, and she's here with attorneys, correct? That
yes. In fact, one of them was my
system.
attorney. One of them was my attorney in the beginning of my case.
Which one?
Amy Eisenberg, the one with the hat, the cowboy. Yep.
Wow. So she's your attorney, representing you.
Yes.
And here she is with the judge.
Yes. Yes. And I didn't know at the time, I didn't know any of this when I retained her. And later on, I noticed that she wasn't, the fees were high, and I felt like there was things happening that I didn't feel like she was being honest. And so she actually was removing herself from the case. And then I ended up with, another attorney, but that's also another tactic. What they try to do is that they threaten you, and they threaten the attorney that's representing you. So a lot of times these attorneys either get on the case and make a little money off of it, and then they say, okay, I'm recusing myself. And then before you know it, you're going through like 6, 7, 8 different attorneys. And then what the judge was trying to do was hold that against me. even though some of the attorneys asked to be removed from the case. That wasn't even my fault. And so these were little tactics that the court were doing. But in my case, it got so bad to the point where I could not afford to pay an attorney, because any assets that I received with the divorce, I was court ordered to pay out all these court appointed, if it was AFCs, if it was the attorneys, if it was the parent coordinator, I had to pay for them.
So they work basically to deplete your funds, right? This is
Correct.
what happens. You're going through, you're paying your court appointed attorneys, the ACF, is it, you're paying the
Attorney for
supervision,
the child.
AFC, supervision you're paying for. It's a lot of money. Why would this judge work against you? Why was she working against you or making it difficult for you?
I mean, from my understanding, talking to other parents, it just seems like she tends to favor the moneyed spouse. What she does is she favors one parent and then completely restricts access from the other parent. I don't know why. I wasn't asking for full custody. I wasn't asking. I just wanted to get divorced, and I wanted to be amicable and be able to co-parent with the proper, the proper, like if it was, because he was being difficult, like even if we needed a parent coordinator, or if we, had like one of those family wizard apps, anything that we would be able to co-parent amicably. So that's where it was very questionable. But it seemed like she had made up her mind, which I believe my ex-husband and his attorney, his attorney is Kim Rayner. She's notorious for, doing these sort of things as far as just unethical behavior with cases like mine. And definitely there was some sort of ex parte communication before and throughout the divorce proceeding.
Did
As
his
far
attorney have, did you know if they had any relationship, his attorney and the judge, or were they friends?
I mean, Rockland County is very small, so a lot of the attorneys have that relationship. I believe at the time the judge had made up her mind. My ex-husband, when I decided to get the divorce, he had physically assaulted me. So with that, he had filed. He must have already retained an attorney or had some attorney that he was already talking to. So there definitely was some kind of ex parte communication, because then this judge was the presiding judge. So I believe it was already
So, he may
predicted,
have seen
like,
this.
yeah,
He
yeah. I
saw it
mean, because
coming. He saw
as
where
far as,
the
yeah,
marriage was
because as
going.
far as attorneys, I think it just, he had probably got to the judge first. His attorney was, because there was a few attorneys that have very close relationship with this judge. In fact, it got to a point where these attorneys that had that close relationship with the judge were actually working against me. They weren't even there representing me. I had one
Right.
attorney, Jim Sexton, who stole $135,000 out of my money out of an escrow account, and it wasn't even, he had no right to do it. He just took it, and then all of a sudden he was off my case. I mean, it got to a
Is
point.
there not I'm sorry, not to cut, but is that not a crime? I mean, he stole
Yes,
money.
yes, but
Was there
I
a police
reached
report
out to,
made?
correct. I reached out to the the district attorney. I reached out to nothing. It's just that no one wants to help me. No one wants to do anything. I mean, that's so.
Divorces can be very expensive. I've spoken to other women who had their ex-husbands were made a lot of money, knew a lot of people, and they just did not want to pay whatever money they were going to have to pay up in a divorce. Like you, and I'm not sure if if you're, you sound like you're employed, but I've spoken
Yes.
to women who were not employed. They were, stay-at-home moms, so that was their job, which is a big job. Don't get me wrong, it's a huge job to raise children,
Mhm.
and so they had no finances of their own, and in a divorce, it was going to be pretty expensive for the ex-husband. So
Correct.
what they did in that case is they get to the attorneys first, the attorneys then get to the judges first, and then they work from there to make it go
Right.
in the favor of the husband.
And that's what happened
We
with
often hear that it's the women that get favored in court, but unless the husband is
right.
making a lot of
Whereas,
money.
correct. I was a stay-home mom, and he was the one who filed, and it got to the judge and to an attorney first, and then filed. When with my case though, it was during the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit, so I wanted to go back to work. That was the problem. I wanted to go back to work. I wanted to even go back to school and take a couple of courses, but my ex was so controlling and he didn't want that. So he kind of beat me to the punch. Like, he's like, all right, well, I'm going to then just file. And he just kind of was like, before any of that was going to happen, he was like, nope, all right, I'm going to just file, and I'm going to, I'm going to throw you out on the street. Cause I pretty much got kicked out of the house. He like threw me out on the street and I had nothing. So yeah, I was in that situation, but
Wow.
I then eventually, thank God.
And what about the children? What did your children want? Who did they want to be with? Right. I'm sure they love both parents. That's, but who
They
did they
wanted to
want to
be
be
with
with?
me. My daughter wrote numerous letters to the judge. In fact, I have copies, and I have, evidence. I have evidence of text messages between her and her attorney. The verbal abuse was just, she could not, it was just bad. And then once he moved in the girlfriend, it just got worse. And he likes to drink, and she likes to drink, and there's a lot of substance abuse, a lot of partying, unsupervised, the children, being exposed to a lot of, a lot of
And
things
and
during these.
and the judge was aware of this because you actually even told the
Yes.
judge that your ex-husband would come pick up the kids after having been drinking, right? And you can see
Correct.
it in his face, you can smell it on him, you know him very well. And you even had an investigator, private investigator
Yes. Follow him. Yep.
follow him, right? And it
And had
determined that he was drinking.
documented,
And what
documented.
did the judge say about this?
Nothing. She did absolutely nothing. In fact, then his attorney, Kim Rayner, was arguing, oh, come on, Your Honor, he can have one drink. And then the AFCs, the attorneys for the children, both of them, one was Nicole Greenwald for my daughter and Veronica Young for my son, were both like, oh, come on, Your Honor, it's not a big deal. They didn't think it was a big deal. And I was there, I only addressed it because I was worried about my children's safety.
Right.
It wasn't because I was trying to, attack him. That wasn't the case. It was just, I was very concerned. My daughter was concerned. In fact, in one of the cases I was with, I had a visit with my daughter, and she was expressing that, Mom, we were at a party and Daddy was drinking and his girlfriend and this and that. And then he put me and my friend in the car, and I just didn't feel comfortable. I mean, you're talking about, then she was at the time 12 years old. She was very aware of what was going on, and she was expressing her, her feelings and what she didn't feel comfortable with. So of course, as any loving parent, right, you address the issue, right? You're just like,
Right.
okay, my daughter's not okay with it. I'm not okay with it. I'm trying to avoid any issues. But my daughter expressed it, the more I expressed it, the more my son expressed it, the court just kept retaliating. And it got to a point where then they started threatening us. They were
In what way?
threatening
How did they threaten you?
through, numerous times. She was going to put me in jail. My ex-husband would ask his attorney to ask the judge to put me in a mental institution for 90 days, put me in jail, remove money, my entitled money. If it was maintenance, he would ask the judge to remove that. So financially, I would, struggle. I was constantly being threatened that I was going to go to jail.
And the
All
judge
the
would make these threats to you in
constantly.
court. Really?
And I was never hostile. I was always calm. And she would just constantly threaten me. I'm going to put you in jail if you speak. I'm going to put you in jail. Sit down. I'm going to put you in jail. Like it was just constantly, I'm going to put you in
Oh,
jail, to the point where she would bring my children to court and in open court. Like, I mean, she would like literally bring them in open court, and she would speak that way in front of my children, and that my children were afraid of her, and they were afraid that something might happen to me.
sure.
And so they started to, they were worried to that if they say anything, is something going to happen to them? Are they going to go
Right.
to jail? Are they going to be put away? In fact, there was an incident where my daughter was told by her attorney that if she doesn't comply and she doesn't live with the father and just deal with it, they're going to put her in foster care.
Really?
Yes. And my daughter
Wow.
was very upset and she was scared and she didn't know what to do. She was like, Mommy, is this true? And I'm like, of course I'm trying to calm her down. And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. But, these were things that not only were they threatening me, but they were threatening my children,
Right.
to just, do what the judge says.
Now, with all these complaints on this judge, because there are several complaints against her, um, she still manages to go from family court up into the Supreme Court. Tell me
Correct.
about where she's at now.
Yeah, she's now a Supreme Court judge. Interestingly, her previous law clerk, who was a family court judge, Judge Tangway, is now running for Supreme Court this year. Um, but so unfortunately now she's in Supreme Court. She's still taking on matrimonial cases. Pretty much all matrimonial cases. So she still deals with, families. But yeah, she has, she's litigated, she's there, to also civil cases. And I mean, I know someone who had who filed something, and it was not in regards of a family court matter, but it was something else. And yeah, I mean, she makes these, horrific decisions that are just very unethical. And her behavior in court, like the way her demeanor in court is just unacceptable. I mean,
Yeah, it's
she's just,
unfortunate because it sounds very much like another judge that I've had people talk to me about, who's had a lot of grievances filed against her. She tried to move up to the Supreme Court. She wasn't successful. She's still in the family courts now, but it sounds very similar. What's going on now with your case? Where are you at the moment?
I mean, now I'm trying to, well, I had to litigate as pro se. But once I started to litigate as pro se, without an attorney, the judge then restricted my access to accessing the court, with family court and Supreme Court. And then just recently, my ex filed a contempt motion a couple months ago, um, asking for a permanent order of protection, so that I wouldn't be
On
able
what
to.
grounds? Why did he?
No grounds. Just kind of just saying, oh, I showed up, or, trying to see my kids or whatever. And yeah, he felt that, okay, let me put a permanent order of protection. And the judge decides to have a hearing without me there, without my presence, without an attorney to represent me. From my understanding, because I wasn't there, I was never served. From my understanding, apparently there's a permanent order of protection. Um, and
So you currently have an order of
I've never
protection.
done anything. I'm not, I have never, I don't remember the last time I saw my ex-husband. I don't, we don't cross paths. I've never called. I
And
don't.
that's just an order of protection against your husband, so you can't be anywhere your husband
And
um,
my children.
and your
It's
children.
mainly my children. So that's another tactic of trying to keep me from having access to my children. Yeah, from to attend any, if it's, school functions or birthdays or anything.
So
Yeah,
you're being like removed from your children's
pretty
lives
much.
almost.
Yeah, for no reason.
Wow.
I've never hurt my children. I don't do drugs. I don't, I've never had issues with the law. I actually work in a school. I work with children. I raise my kids. I just, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
all because of, this judge and my ex-husband that who wants to,
Who just
I guess,
had who made us a lot of money and had certain connections, and he was able to beat you to the punch pretty much. And
yeah,
when was the last time you seen your children?
it's 2.5 years.
Oh,
And
wow,
they
I'm
live,
sorry.
they only live a block away from me. I mean, I still live in Rockland County. I can walk, where, I mean, I'm not far from them. Their schools, they're very close. Like I actually work in the school district, but
And that's gotta be hard. I mean, you have this order of protection, you wanna see your kids, and that's probably why, other parents who had similar situations who've gone to see their kids because they want to see they love their kids, and they've been arrested for it just because
correct.
they've tried
Yeah,
to see their kids, or
that's all
because
they
they
want.
can't afford the supervision, right? The $150 an hour to visit with your children. So you go and you sneak in maybe to the auditorium of the
Yes,
school while there's a performance there, and you're a criminal and you're arrested because of that.
yes,
That's
yeah.
horrible.
I have a friend who just got arrested, and she has to stay in for 60 days just because she wants to see her kids. This is where our taxes, like, this is where our tax money is going to, these family court cases, Supreme Court matrimonial cases. They're using their access to jail, like, to put innocent parents in jail. They're
They're
ignoring,
using the law against you, and
yeah, they're
once they
ignoring the
realize
crime.
you have no
They're just,
attorney.
yeah. And a lot of times when there's warrant for their arrest or whatever, or they arrest them, there's never any bail. They can't even, like, pay bail. It's just you're arrested, you're going to jail, and you're going to stay there for, or they try to put you in a mental institution. They
Wow.
try to do that too sometimes.
So you put you in jail with no bail. Meanwhile, they're letting real criminals out without bail here
With
in New
bail,
York.
yeah, they could just roam free. It's like, you
Wow.
know,
What recourse do parents such as yourself have? I mean, what actions are you taking besides obviously fighting it in court? Is there a group of parents that are coming together
I mean,
to speak out on this?
I mean, at this point, yeah, you try to, go to the media. You try to tell your story and expose these judges. Um, Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's a fight. You just have to keep, you can't give up. You just have to keep going, and you have to keep fighting. And yes, a lot of, you connect with other parents that are going through the same thing. Um, but other than that, I mean, in my case, like I said, she's restricting me from, she's like blocking me from accessing the court to file a petition, like, or anything. If it's, just to even try to see my children,
That's
so
that's evil. I mean, it's just as you were telling me about it when we were on the phone. Once I got off the phone, I just thought to myself, how evil can these people really be? I mean, to do this intentionally, knowingly, to a family, to children, to a mom, and be okay with it and go to sleep at night. It's horrible.
I know. And you know, she has a foster child. So, like, for her, like, you would think, like, what would any parent feel like if someone just took your kid away, like, or your children away? I mean, I don't know how she thinks she can just think she has the right to just take the children away. I mean, they're my children. I raised them, like, you know, um
I don't
and the
understand
fact
how
that
you.
my kids kept saying, please, like, begging the judge, like, they were begging the judge, like, I want to be with my mom, like, when can I be with my mom, when can I see my mom? I mean, begging her. She didn't care. There was no, like, remorse or anything.
Unbelievable.
I don't know how anyone could,
How can they continue to keep this order of protection? Without any any reason for it. There's no basis, no
I
reason, no
don't know. I
grounds
mean,
for
I
this.
like I said,
I'm dumbfounded how that can happen.
I
Maybe I
know.
just
I tried filing, because I've been doing some of my own, like, filings. I tried filing, like, a motion against it, because there was no trial on it. I never appeared at a hearing. I didn't have my due process. I didn't. But with this gatekeeper that the judge put in place, they would just, you know, kick it out. They would just say, nope, we're not accepting it. That right there is
and
like
what's a
violating my
gatekeeper?
rights. You're violating
Just
my constitutional rights.
tell me what a gatekeeper is, just for
I
people.
mean, in New York, they call it a gatekeeper. I think in other states, it's something different. But basically, it's just an order that the judge places an order, basically saying you're prohibited in filing any motion, any petition, anything, unless the judge decides to entertain it. If the judge, it's that presiding judge that put that gatekeeper. They're the ones that can decide if they want to either hear that motion or dismiss it.
So if she's done with this and she doesn't want to hear anymore, you can't
Yeah,
file any motions, file anything. You can't use the court to your advantage.
correct.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
You want to talk about corruption and misconducts?
It's
Yeah,
very corrupt. I mean, it's very frustrating, and I'm sure for you it's a lot more frustrating. But just hearing your story and hearing the story of others is very frustrating too, because I'm just wondering, what do you do? Like, what do you do?
I
How do you
don't
fight
know.
this?
I know. And that's why
Yeah.
I want to speak out, speak up and, tell my story and, obviously educate and, other parents that are going into the family court or Supreme Court, um, to educate yourself and be careful, like, because, you know, they're not there for your children's best interest or your best interest. It's a business for them. And and anything can happen. I thought I was going in thinking, okay, I'm going to get divorced. We're gonna, I'm going to move on, and we're going to be able to see, both see our, both of us are going to be able to see our children, and we're going to just, and that wasn't the case. I was very blindsided. I had no idea that this is what the system
Happens.
is all about.
Right.
From my understanding, once you step foot in that courtroom, they own you. They own your children, they own your assets, they own your money. I mean, I've been threatened, that I'm gonna, they're gonna put a lien on my house. I've been threatened so many times of all sorts of things. Just threats of, they're gonna take everything, all my money. I mean, I've been thrown out on the street. Like they took my car away. Like it's just, you know, it's just abuse. They just do whatever they want.
It's exactly the same story that I've heard from other people. And it's very unfortunate. And I'm glad that you're speaking out. And I agree with you. Like, I've spoken to other people, and they just don't know what else to do but talk about it, right? And try to reach as many people and tell their story, share their story, make people aware of what's happening in family court. That seems that like that's the only thing that we can do, but it's an important thing to do. So I appreciate you coming on and speaking to me about your situation, your case. And it's been 30, almost 40 minutes actually. So is there anything else before we wrap up that you'd like to mention tonight?
I mean, no, I guess, and just like I said, and when if anyone's going through this same situation, I mean, just don't give up. Just keep fighting. Find other, ways of trying to see, other ways to try to get, to get back into court and try to get your kids back. But just don't give up. Don't, that's all I can say. I mean, I unfortunately there's been some parents that I know, like, that they have, they gave up, and and they wait till the child ages out. But your kids need you, and they need both parents, and it's just important to stay focused and advocate, and just stay strong and just move forward.
Didi
Oh, I
Diaz,
know Didi.
who,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Hmm.
she's also gone through this. She's
Yep.
had her own battles with Marianne Scott, a radical neighbor. Another judge, she says, he uses the same tactic, accusing parents of having mental problems in order to
Yep.
remove children illegally.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's just very unfortunate. Thank you, Didi. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate that. And if you'd like to come on at some other point, you have my number. Reach out to me. Maybe if you have an update
Yes.
or
I
something
hope
that
we're
you'd like to
praying.
convey. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you'd like to convey something to a message to other parents, just feel free to reach out to me. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Is there anything else
Thank
you want
you.
before I let you? Well, take
No,
care. Have a good
thank you
weekend. If
so
there's
much.
anything else,
Yeah.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Take care. Folks, that's that's very unfortunate and it's very sad. And I'm not going through it. I'm a parent. I have two kids, and I'm not going through that. So I can't begin to try to understand what parents who are in that situation are going through or the emotions that they're experiencing. But just hearing about it from families that are going through this gives me my own set of emotions. Sadness, a lot of it is anger because I want to go and fight people for them. It's very unfortunate, but we can't just go and do that, right? But we can spread the word. We can share their stories. We can make other people aware about this. You know, the more we put this on social media, this is the power of the internet, the power of social media. Social media, internet is a gift and a curse. But the gift is that you can reach a lot more people nowadays than you once could. And you can do it for relatively cheap, for free even. And so we have to share and spread the message. That goes for all forms of corruption and anything that we see needs to be changed. We have to make people aware about it. So I appreciate the families who are fighting the fight and also making people aware of what's happening in the family court. I often talk about politics, political corruption, city council, right? The mayor, assemblymen, senators. But in the family court, there are judges there that are just as corrupt as these elected officials that I often speak about on my podcast. And many times they are connected. There's a connection there, as you can see. And ultimately, it's all about the money. And in this situation with these parents, many times these judges are doing this because they are there for the wealthier parent, whoever is willing to spend the money, maybe even donate to their campaigns through their attorneys, as you see there with this judge, Sherry Eisenpress. Sherry, we're watching you. We have you on our radar now. And everyone in Rockland County and in the state of New York needs to know who she is and what she's done to families. Folks, I'm Freddie Vasquez. This is Basement Politics Unfiltered. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Have a blessed and good evening.